Merlin is our wizard here in Britain. He is a spirit of the land, and Britain is called Clas Merlin in some of the stories, meaning Merlin's place. One thing to remember right from the start is that Merlin is far, far older than the Arthurian legends, or indeed any of the written history about him. Our records only go back about 2,000 years, which is no time at all, even in human history. Interestingly, a BBC article from the 20th of January 2016 tells of recent research that shows our fairy stories are much older than historians previously thought. Using techniques normally employed by biologists, Durham University anthropologist Dr. Jamie Tarani studied links between stories from around the world and found some of the tales were far, far older than the earliest literary records. In fact, Dr. Tarani traced several stories back more than 5,000 years ago to when Eastern and Western Indo-European languages split. The story's roots are prehistoric, dating back to the Bronze Age. It's quite possible, likely even, that all our stories are this old. If we come to be convinced of this, it's another area of change we're going to need Merlin's help with, as it will set our current ideas of progress right on their heads. And we'll need his help getting to their roots, so we can understand what they really say, rather than translating them into modern speak with modern concepts that are not what the stories are about at all. Nowadays, there's an absolute plethora of books, writing, films, stories, pictures and legends about Merlin. Some good, some not so good, and some just downright awful, at least in our opinion. It all depends on what you're looking at and where you are looking from, and, of course, what you want to either do with or gain from your story or history. Merlin's tales tell us he has had many incarnations in many places around the country and indeed around Europe. Add in that many of them have apparently been at the same time, so you cannot think of them in linear time, and you see why he confuses academics like crazy. If we really want to get to know him, then Merlin requires us to think outside the box. We will lose the plot entirely if we get stuck in university libraries or lectures, or between the hidebound covers of some ancient tome. Most of all, he needs us to not want to have a perfect answer about who he is, and that not wanting is hard to do. He is never still, he never stops moving, never stops growing and changing and evolving. He is continually in motion in both time and space, and he is always with us, just as he promises in the stories. To know Merlin is much easier once we're able to see him, and this means seeing him in everything around us, in all of nature, for this is what he is. As Breton writer Jean Michael says, Merlin is a spirit of nature, perhaps the spirit of nature, or rather the spirit in its masculine form. He appears in many guises, as the Green Man, the Wild Man of the Forest, as an old wizard, a young boy, or a giant herdsman with a huge club, or a stag. He can and does appear as anything we need in order that he may become visible to us. I said the masculine form of the spirit, for Merlin partners with the feminine. His partner is called Vivian or Nimue, and other names too, and she is also known for a dear woman, especially among the Breton people. And she too is a doorkeeper, a threshold keeper. This relationship is much deeper than the Victorian romantic feminine fatale she is normally portrayed as. Merlin has become legendary. But what does that mean? In academic terms, the word legendary is often thought to only mean imaginary, made up, and therefore untrue. But if you go and look the word up, you will find it means renowned, remarkable, and extraordinary, and that is just how real Merlin is. The word legendary is also said to mean fairy tale, fabled, and fabulous, and both Merlin and his stories are certainly all of this. In Britain, tales and stories have always been our way of telling the lore onto our children and back to ourselves as well. We are known for tale weavers. We all love stories, whether we read them, listen to them, watch them in film or a play, run them through our mind's eye, or play them on a PlayStation. Stories enchant us, and to enchant something means to sing it into life. In this case, Merlin's stories sing us into life. The whole concept of legend and enchantment needs rethinking to become broader and deeper, and so able to include more reality. And what are fairy stories? Who are the Fae? Are they part of Merlin's people? Is he part of the Fae? The Fae are the fairy folk, the bright ones, the little people, the She, and all their ilk. Fae is a word and name common in many forms throughout European folklore. In the parlance of the modern shamanic practitioner, they are part of non-ordinary reality, a term that is non-ordinary, both long-winded and difficult to swallow. The modern core shaman stuff has some similarities to our old ways, but also many differences, and this intimate knowing that we call kenning, of spirit itself and of spirits, including great spirits like Merlin, is not usually found in the modern core practice. Most people today have little or no idea of our old traditions, so when they want a spiritual practice, they go abroad, overseas, out of our land for it. People just don't know where to look for it here in Britain, and they've been told, until they believe it, that our old customs are just a load of primitive superstitions, or else have been made up in modern times and are not really native or indigenous. The old ones have been hiding here in plain sight for the past 2,000 years, and, in consequence, they're very good at it. That's why most people don't know they exist. Merlin has been conflated with all of this superstition, so he has become related more to Harry Potter in most people's minds than to the enormous and powerful spirit of the land he is. Remember, one of the names of Britain is Clas Merlin, Merlin's land. Merlin is the spirit and essence, the creative life force and kernel of our land. He has been incarnate in many times and many places throughout Britain, and so has given physical personification and embodiment to a very deep principle. He is the epitome and archetype of the walker between worlds, what we know nowadays as the shaman. As we learn more about him, we find he goes back into a deep past of which we have no modern style records. The only way to explore the past is in ways not many archaeologists or academics can tolerate, although some have, and that's journeying. If you're willing to open up to the possibilities of journeying, then you'll gradually discover more and more of him. There is always a subtle problem with wanting to rely on the written word. Firstly, there is the belief that writing only came in with the Romans. It's one that's still very prevalent and fits well with the mistaken concept that our prehistoric ancestors were savages, whose lives were nasty, brutish and short. This belief began to be knocked down in the 1960s, but is still the one most people hold and is a big problem as it stands there in the way of reality. Think of Pink Floyd's song One More Brick in the Wall, and Merlin is not about walls. In fact, just the opposite. He's about doorways and thresholds. Then there is the problem of the survival of the written word. We in Britain live in a wet, boggy country, many parts of which have acid soil, so unless things are written on stone, they do not survive. And when was the last time you chiseled out a letter on a piece of stone? But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Because writing may not have survived in our climate, and evidence of it certainly has not yet been discovered, that does not mean we didn't do it. We really do not know what our prehistoric ancestors wrote down, or if they did, or on what they might have written, or when they began to do writing. Paper is very easy to make, but it doesn't last a day if you leave it out in the rain. Similarly, we used to make inks at school, and they disappear like nobody's business in the wet. Even birch bark and animal hide doesn't last long in our soggy climate. Most of the ancient writing that has been found has come from dry desert type places, and or has been carefully preserved in dry caves or stone buildings. Our folk lived in very nice roundhouses. They are ecologically sound in that they go back to nature pretty quickly once you stop living in them, along with things like paper and bark and skins. Ask any archaeologist about finding evidence for even an Anglo-Saxon roundhouse, and they are only in the region of 1,500 years old. They'll roll their eyes and tell you the best they usually find is post-hole marks in the soil to show a pit that has now been filled up with soil similar to what is around it, and so very hard to see. Our Mesolithic ancestors, a mere 7,000 to 12,000 years ago, lived in what we might now call benders, so there really isn't going to be much to find, is there? Starkar, for instance, the place of the stunning deer masks, has been a wonderful addition to our scanty knowledge of those times, and has helped us understand the fascinating and complex society of Doggerland a little better, but has not been able to throw any light at all on our writing skills. Just because the only written evidence of Merlin that scholars have found so far is only 1,000 to 1,500 years old, does not mean that is when someone invented Merlin. He is ancient. Very ancient, and was never invented. Our ancestors way back knew him intimately. They likely called him by different names to the Merlin we know. Indeed, in the old Brythonic tongue, his name would be Myrthin. This can all be rather troublesome if you like a tidy life, and that could well be part of why our modern idea of Merlin gets so dumbed down. Merlin is complex, non-linear, and it's just not possible to put him in a box. He lives in our tales as well as in our nature, but unfortunately the academic fraternity tends to disparage these tales, telling us they have nothing to do with history, and so are not true. Well, most of the time the other world doesn't have anything to do with history as it is taught in schools and universities either. It just isn't useful. Merlin is spirit. He's not about spirit, he actually is it, as are all of our old and supposedly lost gods in Britain. He and they are otherworldly beings. They are not about history in the everyday meaning of the word. Like so many things, the word history itself has been dumbed down and reduced in scope by the cramped, organised world most people call normality nowadays. If we look at synonyms for the word history, we have narration, record, story, chronicle, saga and memoir, just to mention a few. These are not words that immediately come to most people's minds, but they are good ones. The tales of Merlin are all of these things: story, chronicle, saga, and even memoir, but they certainly do not come under the guise of linear history as it is taught nowadays, and nor should they, for that's not their purpose. They are not about a set of facts that follow along in chronological order, and have been put together by a coterie of people who view those facts in a particular light, and who also wish to propound them to others and so increase the set of believers. Most of us know the terms rewriting history, and history is always written by the winners, but we tend to forget those useful aphorisms when presented with a historian with alphabet soup after her or his name and an authoritative manner. We should hang on to them. They keep us rooted in reality. Merlin is about living in the here and now. He is that continuous and ever-changing threshold that is reality. If you want to learn more about Merlin, then please take a look at our book Merlin by Elen Sentier. It's the best starting place you will find for taking your first steps with Merlin. It's available right now from Moonbooks. Thank you so much for watching. A special thank you to our members. You can also become a member by clicking that little join button. Subscribe for weekly content, ring the bell, and we'll see you next time.